Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz here on YouTube. What is going on? Matt O'Leary with Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how's it going, my friend?
It's going. Trying to get ready for this weekend with the New York Giants on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see how that one goes. And obviously the Jets versus Vikings, that's a much more intriguing matchup. Should be a good one. Should be an exciting weekend for both teams, but unfortunately, both teams kind of slumping right now.
Both teams slumping. I've spent my week in order to get over a still disgusting loss to Denver, which I know we spent a lot of time on Monday talking about, still frustrated about it. But I've spent pretty much the last 2 days just refreshing Twitter, waiting for this Davante Adams trade to go through. Because I feel like this is coming sooner rather than later. Am I coping, or you think Davante Adams to the Jets is realistic here?
I think it's realistic for one reason and one reason only. Big Apple Blitz's favorite insider came back to social media, came back to Twitter for a small period of time, tweeted out that he thinks that that's the deal that gets done, and then he disappeared back into the darkness once again. So Pretty Ricky made the tweet, said Davante Adams likely going to the Jets. Then he deleted his Twitter once again. So I got to say, he's got a great track record. Yeah, he took some L's, but he's the people's insider. I think that it's going to happen.
I do too. I think it just makes a lot of sense. The Jets have been shopping for Davante Adams for over a year now at this point.
Let me throw out my take. I don't think it should happen. I don't think it should. I think this is a classic case of a team finding its weaknesses. And what I mean by that is focusing on the wrong things. Like, this is not the real problem with this Jets team. The playmakers are not the real problem here. The offensive coordinator is the problem. The need for a defensive lineman and an edge rusher is greater than the need for a Davante Adams. This just feels like a team making splash move after splash move and not recognizing what the real problems are and kind of putting icing on top of a shit cake is how I feel about it.
So I definitely agree the Jets need a defensive lineman more than they need a Davante Adams. But I do think the Jets win that game against Denver if Davante Adams is on the team, because I don't think there's the miscommunication up the seam with that Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers had. We talked a lot about Malik Neighbors being idiot proof. I think adding Davante Adams might make this offense Nathaniel Hackett proof is my hope, or at least make it a step closer to that being the case. Play calling matters, coaching matters. I would still be concerned about this staff and the offensive coordinator, even if they did add Davante Adams. But if they're going for it, and even with the questions right now with the coaching staff, I don't hate them making a all-in move and trying to better this offense.
I don't hate it. I get it. I see the logic. To me, it's just backwards logic and not your logic necessarily. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that Davante Adams, you're right, probably makes a difference in that game against the Broncos. But if I'm the Jets, I'm not looking for what makes a difference in that game against the Broncos. How do we win that Broncos game? I'm looking for how can we get this thing on track with the pieces that we have in place? Where are our true weaknesses that we need to upgrade so that when we get later in the season, everybody should be on the same page by week 10 anyway, right? You know, if that Broncos game happens in week 10, Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson probably are on the same page. Whether Davante Adams is on this team or not, they probably win that game because they've got enough reps together and they've got their communication and chemistry figured out. So to me, it's like Davante Adams, sure, retroactively, if you put him on that team last week, they probably win this game. But I don't think the difference in a Davante Adams being on this team in week 10 is as great as a difference of going out there and finding an edge rusher. And I understand there aren't really premium edge rushers out there for the taking. You're not just going to make a trade and boom, voila, your pass rushing problem is solved if you're the New York Jets. But I also just think, again, this is a team that has pieces in place that needs to get these pieces on the same page and get them developing. And the only way they can do that is to make changes to the way that they're coaching these players and the way that they're calling these plays. Whether you want to blame Salah, you want to blame Hackett, whatever. I mean, honestly, I think I've seen enough of Hackett. I've been saying that if you got to strip him of playing calling duties this early in the season, do what you got to do to get this thing on track. But to me, throwing another shiny piece into the equation here, another mouth that you need to feed, it doesn't necessarily solve the problems.
Todd Downing season, baby. Why not give him the play calling duties? He did it for a horrible Tennessee team a couple years ago. It can't get much worse than Nathaniel Hackett. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to touch on that at the beginning here because obviously that's been a big story, the Davante Adams stuff this week, and it does feel like this is moving quickly. Like Adams was on the K Adams show and was like, "Yeah, that was kind of messed up about my head coach liking that Instagram post," and then like felt like 5 minutes later the trade request went through. So we'll see how quickly that moves, but we'll be keeping a close eye on that, maybe reacting to a trade. I would hope live right now. That would be pretty sick. But outside of that, maybe on next week's show.
Yeah, I mean, the live reaction would be awesome. That would be really cool. But again, it would just be us reacting to it in probably two different ways. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I have a different perspective as a fan, not of the team. Maybe that gives me the right perspective or the wrong perspective. I'm not sure. But just from the outside looking in, again, this feels like one of those moves that it almost just feels a little desperate to me. But it just feels like a front office failing to recognize the true weaknesses and strengths of the team and just throwing another splash piece in there to appease the fan base and hope to that will change the problems that don't really exist.
Absolutely. So let's get to this game. I know we spent a lot of time talking storylines not related to this game, but Jets have a big one. They're going on the road to London, neutral site field, facing a familiar face in Sam Darnold and the red hot Minnesota Vikings, who are 4-0 and putting up points every single week. Not a great landing spot after you just lost a game you probably should have won. Although the NFL and this Jets team feels so weird, like it almost would make sense in a way if you lose to a really bad Denver team at home and then play spoiler to the 4-0 Vikings. Like that just feels so 2024 NFL and also so Jets at the same time. But not going to be an easy matchup, clearly, as Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold have been cooking offensively.
Yeah, this isn't going to be an easy matchup by any means. And I do have to remind Jets fans and Packers fans, unfortunately, the last time Aaron Rodgers played in London, he didn't get the win. He lost to a 2022 New York Giants team that shocked everybody on the road in that neutral site. Daniel Jones had one of the best performances of his career, and Aaron Rodgers didn't. So maybe he doesn't like playing in London. Maybe that was just a flash in the pan, which is probably what it was. But, you know, these neutral site games are always interesting because, yeah, they're not at home. Everybody's kind of uncomfortable with the environment, and it often just makes things a little bit tricky for both of the teams there. So this would be, like you said, the perfect opportunity for the Jets to kind of sneak up on the Vikings and hand them their first loss. But then again, this Vikings team is legit. I will say, though, this Vikings team has been as legit as they've been because their defense has done a tremendous job confusing opposing quarterbacks. But they haven't faced Aaron Rodgers yet, right? One of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. Then again, they're also facing, in my opinion, one of the dumbest offensive coordinators in the NFL with Nathaniel Hackett. So it's a give and a take here. But if somebody's going to beat that Brian Flores defense, it might just end up being Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about it too. Like, not gonna lie, there is a very big coaching variance going from one side of the aisle that has Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach and offensive coordinator, and then Kevin O'Connell at head coach and Brian Flores as defensive coordinator. Like clearly advantage Minnesota Vikings there. I don't think even the most optimistic of Jet fans is going to fight you on that one. But I think that the Aaron Rodgers factor is a really big one because what this Minnesota Vikings team really likes to do is they blitz and they blitz a lot. They're second in the NFL in blitz rate. So if the Jets offense is to have success, I think we're going to need to see a game plan similar to what we saw against New England, where they came out throwing and it was a lot of quick stuff of Rodgers getting the ball out of his hands quickly. Also, as the Vikings have played really well defensively, they're the number one defense in DVOA. They've also allowed the most passing yards. So like there is a script here where I think the Jets could come in and more specifically Rodgers, and if he's on the same page with his weapons, actually have some success offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it too. Again, it's the experience of Rodgers can do so much for this team. It's just my one fear that I've always had and still have. I mean, listen, I had these fears in the offseason. They're being reaffirmed now. Is Hackett going to just handcuff this team and just completely handicap what they're able to do on offense? But with Aaron Rodgers going up against the Flores defense, I would be curious to see any numbers on that in the past when he's faced Flores-led defenses, because what Flores has been doing so far this season has just been absolutely incredible. He's well on his way to assistant coach of the year if the Vikings maintain their shape and keep this pace. He's been incredible. And the only way that I think the Jets can pick apart this defense and put up some points is going to be with those timing routes and with that chemistry between Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. Like, to me, this needs to be the Garrett Wilson breakout game. I don't think he's really had it yet. He's had some decent moments. He scored that touchdown against the Patriots, sure, but they really need to get Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson on the same page. Need the Garrett Wilson breakout game against a very good Vikings defense.
Yeah, the Vikings defense is really strong, but they don't really have a corner like a Christian Gonzalez, who he went up against a couple weeks ago, or a Pat Surtain, who he went up last week. So like, there's really not that built-in excuse. Like, I feel like we've kind of, I guess, yeah, excused the performance the last couple of weeks because of the competition that he was going up against and some of the league's best corners. Like, I'm sorry, at this point in his career, like Stephon Gilmore in 2024, not that guy at 34 years old. It's not, 2018 anymore. So there's really not, like I said, there's not that built-in excuse. It's really up to him and Rodgers too. But I put it more so on the skill guys to get right and get on the same page. Same could be said about Breece Hall, but as I mentioned, like the Vikings' strength is against the run. They've been a little susceptible to the passing attack. So maybe Breece through the air, but I'm not really looking at this and going, oh yeah, like here's where we're gonna see Breece Hall rush for $120 this week.
Yeah, and that's honestly been. There's a lot of things that concern me with this Jets offense, but Breece Hall is maybe even the most concerning factor in what's been like a demise in the first 4 weeks of the season. He just hasn't looked right. He hasn't looked like himself. I don't know if, there's an injury that's really bothering him and he's just not able to recover from it. Whatever it is, sure, he's made an impact in the receiving game, like you mentioned, and he's had a few games with 4+ receptions, and he had that great touchdown grab against the Titans. All those things true, but just running between the tackles, even running off tackle, he just hasn't looked completely comfortable running the football this season. And I think in many ways, the rookie Braylon Allen has looked like a better runner, not a better player, but a better runner. And I don't know if this is really the game where that gets right either against a good Vikings defense, but you'd like to see it get right, if not now, at least next week, because Breece Hall just doesn't look comfortable and something needs to change.
Yeah, something definitely does need to change. I don't want to look too far ahead, but Buffalo just got gashed by the Baltimore Ravens run game, so maybe that would be the opportunity for these Jets backs and Breece Hall in particular to get going. But again, I don't want to look too far ahead here on this game against Minnesota. To me, when I look at it from the Jets side, we talked a lot about Sam Darnold and the success that he's having. The turnovers have still been there, though. He has 3 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 4 times. So I do think the Jets are going to have to take a page out of Brian Flores' book, blitz him a little bit and confuse him, and hopefully bait him into a couple of turnovers. Because as good as he's played so far this year, there still is that factor with Sam Darnold that he can make one of those, poor decision throws or lose the football if he's hit.
Yeah, and that's also just another variable to this equation. Is this a Sam Darnold revenge game? Like, is he going to have an extra chip on his shoulder? Are the turnovers that you just mentioned not going to exist because he's so locked in, dialed in, no longer seeing ghosts, just seeing wide open spaces to throw the ball into? That's something that concerns me for the Jets. Listen, I've always liked Sam Darnold. I know Jets fans, they had enough of him. It was ready to move on for many of them. Many of the rest of them wanted to keep him. I know that we've discussed that before. The Sam Darnold truthers that didn't want to see Zach Wilson come to town. And at the end of the day, now it's Rodgers versus Darnold. It's a crazy twist and turn of events. It makes for an incredible matchup for the NFL. Great job by the schedule makers to put this one in London and get a bunch of eyes on it. But I am concerned about that. Like, Sam Darnold really has looked so good this season. He's been locked in since week 1. And some of the throws that he's making, he's only getting better week to week is how it feels. Like he's only just now catching fire with some of those passes that he had against the Packers last week. So great levels of concern for me. But, you are right. He's been turnover prone throughout his career, and he's often been turnover prone when under pressure. And what the Vikings have done well, he hasn't faced a ton of pressure.
Yeah.
If the Jets can get home, if Will McDonald could start applying some pressure, if we can get some of these pass rushers into the face of Sam Darnold, maybe we force some of those turnovers. Maybe the Jets find a way.
That's the thing. Like, if there's another performance defensively, well, and again, they only allowed 10 points against Denver, but the pass rush wasn't getting home against the Broncos. If that happens against the Vikings, Jets are in trouble. Like, they could put up some yardage and some points, especially with that Justin Jefferson connection. Now, in this offseason, we heard a lot about Sauce Gardner going to be traveling a little bit more this year. If there was ever a game for him to travel, it feels like this is the one, right? Against Justin Jefferson.
I would think so. I mean, you're not going to get a tougher matchup defensively on your entire schedule than Justin Jefferson. The guy is an absolute freak. He's the best wide receiver in the NFL when he's got a healthy quarterback. You can make the debate for Tyreek Hill, but he doesn't have anybody to throw him the ball right now. Justin Jefferson, though, pure talent-wise, with chemistry with any quarterback, he's quarterback proof. The guy goes out there and he balls out no matter who's facing him. Like, even if it is Sauce Gardner, even if it is Pat Surtain, he finds ways to make receptions and put up yards and touchdowns. So if there is ever a week where you want your number one guy to be tracking their number one guy, this is the week. You got to do everything you can in your power to try and slow down Justin Jefferson. Which,
again, is easier said than done. Although he didn't have like a monster game against the Giants. He got in the end zone, but I believe it was like 50-something yards, and he's went over 85 every single week since then.
Yeah, week one, iron in and out with Sam Darnold is what I'll call that. Also the Giants defense, I thought, played well in that game. It was their offense that really let them down. Like, they only lost 28-6. It's not like they lost 40-3. I mean, the defense I thought did fine. It's just, honestly, I don't think that the Vikings offense needed to try all that hard because they knew that the Giants offense couldn't respond.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's a good way to look at it. What do you make of this Vikings team? Like, obviously they're 4-0. They're playing really great football, but I guess I don't know if how sustainable is this is the right question, but I guess, do you see them coming back to earth a little bit and still obviously finishing with a winning record and making the playoffs? Or do you think like this is real? They're going to go like 14-3 this year and just be an absolute juggernaut?
Listen, all right, here's what I'm going to tell you. I need to see happen and I want to see happen. Kind of want and need this Vikings team to be legit, be a juggernaut, pay Sam Darnold long-term, and trade J.J. McCarthy to the New York Giants.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. I think everybody knows pre-draft process. I did love J.J. McCarthy. I really, really thought that he was a franchise quarterback. If he was in this 2025 draft class, he's QB1 right now. It's not even a question, okay? So just keep that in mind. Kid's talented. He's really good. I need him on the Giants. But being more realistic, is this team a real juggernaut? Honestly, yeah, I think so. And it's not just because I think Sam Darnold is great, and it's not because I think he's going to continue to have this comeback player of the year campaign. I think he is, but it's really just because of coaching. I think a lot of this modern NFL comes down to coaching. Coaching mistakes sink teams. Talented rosters fail to live up to expectations because of their coaches. The Jets, to me, are the perfect example of that in the NFL right now. I think this is pound for pound, maybe the best roster on paper in the league. But I said all offseason long, I'm scared of the coaching staff squandering this great roster. Now we've got a roster in the Minnesota Vikings that, no, it isn't pound for pound the best. They had holes all over that defense going into the season. Their offense had major question marks. Would Aaron Jones really be able to revive his career coming off of an injury and now playing for a new team? Question marks all over the place. But coaching elevates talent oftentimes. We're seeing Sam Darnold hit this new ceiling now because he's playing under Kevin O'Connell and because he worked under Kyle Shanahan last year. That helped him for sure. But again, that ties into the equation here of coaching matters, and it makes a massive difference at the NFL level in terms of developing players, masking weaknesses, and building a team. And right now, I think that this Vikings team is legit because they have one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL with Kevin O'Connell, great head coach, and Brian Flores should be assistant coach of the year by the end of the season because he's done tremendous work with that defense. So I think this is going to be a tough one for the Jets, but I think every game that a team plays against the Vikings is going to be a tough one. I do think they're legit, and I think they are Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their schedule and they beat up on a Packers team who's really good and really well coached, the Texans who were a playoff team last year, and 49ers who were in the Super Bowl. And I know they've gotten off to a little bit of a slow start in comparison to, where expectations are, but it feels like every year they start like 2-2 and then go on a run and finish like 13-4 and end up a 1 seed. Unfortunately, I don't want to do it to you, but it's the only like one of these things is not like the other. There's the Giants, 49ers, Texans, Packers, three teams who I think a lot of people pick to go in the playoffs and potentially make deep runs. So if they do make it 5 in a row and do beat this Jets team, I think that's by far the most impressive start to this season.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like the Giants team is not like those others, but they've beaten some juggernauts. Like they are a damn good team, this Vikings team. Now I got to see how do they play against this Jets team with a chip on its shoulder, hoping to, find the way to get an upset win. Let's see. I think, like I said, the Jets team is very talented roster wise. Coaching makes a massive difference, but let's see if the Jets can maybe sneak one out against this Vikings team that you're right is just beating up on some very good NFL teams so far this season.
I'm going to give you one more take and my prediction for this game, and then I want you to give me, I guess, your response to what I'm saying. If you're going to call me crazy, and then your game prediction for this one. What I've been saying all week is this Jets team is talented enough to beat any team in the NFL, but they are poorly coached enough where they could lose to any team in the NFL at the same thing, which is a very scary place to be. Like, I would not be surprised at all if the Jets just lost this game to the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are a better coached team. They're hot right now. They're 4-0. But at the same time, I do think this Jets team is a talented one. I think a pissed off Aaron Rodgers is dangerous. And I don't know. The NFL is weird. The Jets losing to Denver and then turning right around and beating the Vikings. That feels like something that really could happen. I'm going to take the Jets 23-20 in this one in overtime in London. So just a close drag out kind of game. Again, I would not be shocked if the Vikings won this game. They're favorites in this game for a reason. They've looked like the better team, but I don't know, the Vikings starting 5-0, the Jets dropping to 2-3. I don't know if I'm ready to make that call yet.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to be the pessimist in this one. I'll spoil it. I'm not going to pick the Giants to win. I'm not going to pick the Jets to win. I think both of us are going to be on the losing end this week. I think that this Vikings team is going to win by a touchdown. I think 27-20. You had 23-20 for the Jets. I think it's going to be close. I think the Jets are going to put up some points and bounce back offensively. Their defense is really good, but I'm a big believer in this Vikings team. I think they're really well built and really well coached. So I'm going to go 27-20 Vikings, and then hopefully we get a get-right game for the Jets. I don't know. This Jets schedule, though, that was a kind of must-win game against the Broncos. Bad Broncos team. This is a tough schedule. So they got to find a way to sneak out some of these upsets. And, yeah, this is a really important game for them.
Yeah, because you got Vikings, then the Bills, then the Steelers on Sunday Night Football as their next three. So that's not easy. I've been saying I think the Jets need to probably take 2 of those 3, so they get to 4-3 going into a little bit of an easier stretch after that. But as you said, this coaching staff, I don't think there is an easy stretch on the schedule because of this coaching staff. But anyway, let's get to your New York Giants. They have what I think is a very tough matchup, honestly. Have to go on the road to Seattle, who's honestly played really well through their first 4 games in the Mike Macdonald era. They've started 3-1. They just suffered their first loss of the season to the Detroit Lions. The Lions were on fire in this game, putting up 42 points. But offensively, I think Geno's looked really good, and they clearly have, the weapons at wide receiver. So I'm thinking this is a tough matchup for the Giants, but I want to get your take on it, obviously, as the Giants guy on this show.
Yeah, this is a really tough matchup for the Giants, and hate to do it, but it's a really tough matchup because Daniel Jones is the quarterback. He doesn't play well against Seattle. I'm still having nightmares over that performance that he had against the Seahawks last week in week 3. That was an absolute disaster. It was really tough to see because week 1, absolute disaster. Like I just said for the Seattle Seahawks game, but also in week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. They lost 40-0. Daniel Jones threw some picks. He was terrible. They get blown out, right? So then in week 2, okay, they're getting blown out once again in the first half. all of a sudden, Daniel Jones revives like Lazarus, storms back, and they beat the Arizona Cardinals with a completely dominant second half. Then in week 3, we're like, all right, Jones is back. The Giants are back. It's going to be like 2022. Let's get this ball rolling. Embarrassed once again. Absolutely demolished by the Seahawks. And it was maybe one of the worst performances that I've ever seen from Daniel Jones, because he was sacked 10 times in that game. And a lot of fans were like, oh my God, this offensive line is terrible. Jones doesn't have any help. He doesn't have any support. And then you really watch the film and you're like, okay, there were wide open receivers all game long. He should have had at least 2 touchdowns to Wan'Dale Robinson alone. He should have had one to Darren Waller. And he ran into about 6 of those 10 sacks by himself. So it's like Daniel Jones versus the Seahawks team. He's never beaten them. He's 0-2 against them in his career. He's never even had a semblance of a good day against them. He's played really poor both times he's faced them, and he's not necessarily coming off with his best performance against the Dallas Cowboys. So the Seahawks team is really good as well. They're bouncing back, trying to bounce back from a loss against the Detroit Lions last week. But Daniel Jones versus the Seahawks defense gives me nightmares.
Yeah, and honestly, outside of this Detroit game, they allowed 20 points, and 3 points. Now, granted, they're not playing like these offensive juggernauts like, the Lions. We know how well coached they are, and their offensive coordinator is likely going to be a head coach this time next year. But they've definitely been on the strong side. The Lions game, as I mentioned again, like just really tough performance, but they have really good cornerback room. I love Devon Witherspoon is awesome. And they've had the emergence of a youngster, Derek Hall, who was their 2nd round pick last year, 4 sacks in 4 games. Just he's wreaking havoc, and it's going to be a tough matchup for this Giants offensive line, who has played better, by the way. Like I know that's usually a huge story, like, oh, the offensive line's not good enough. I don't think you could really have that excuse this year for Daniel Jones and Giants fans. I think the offensive line has been fine. But still, nonetheless, tough matchup with Derek Hall and Boye Mafe on the other side.
Yeah, tough matchup, but I mean, this Giants pass protection unit has been among the best in the NFL. Statistically, their pass blocking win rate, their pass blocking efficiency, they're up there in like the top 10 to 15 in every metric every week. So, it's the excuses have come to an end for Daniel Jones for many Giants fans. For others, there are some excuses. But the one problem that I do foresee, it's not because I think the Giants' offensive line isn't good. I think they're good enough to hang around here. I just think that the problem is Malik Neighbors probably not playing in this game means that Daniel Jones is going to have to survey the field for longer, wait for players to get open, and that's usually when he starts to panic and run into pressure. Even if there isn't pressure, he'll find ways to make there be pressure for himself, and he'll run into a few defensive linemen. And without Malik Neighbors on the field, like we saw last year, I'm afraid that that's what we're going to see in week 5.
Yeah, and like obviously we've seen a bunch of the offense funneled through this young player, which is exciting because of how talented Neighbors is. But like, what's the adjustment? I know that Wan'Dale had a ton of reps last week. Are they just going to funnel 15 targets through Wan'Dale Robinson now and that be the offense? Like, I don't know.
That's what a lot of Giants fans are assuming. I think that's kind of tough to do because Wan'Dale Robinson has been getting open a lot because Malik Neighbors has been obviously soaking up a lot of attention from opposing defenses. And he's running routes that are 10, 15, 20 yards downfield, soaking up attention, which is opening things up underneath for Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know if those opportunities are really there for Wan'Dale getting open underneath, if not for having Neighbors run behind him and take away some of these players that would otherwise be guarding him. So it's kind of just like, I think we're going to see the Giants offense from last year. And this is going to be the Giants offense from last year, but without Saquon Barkley. So this might be really ugly. I can't lie to you. I'm very scared of this one.
Yeah, if Neighbors doesn't play, it's going to be, I think it would be a really long day for this Giants offense. And I don't want to come on here and be negative. I would love to talk about how I think, both teams are going to pull a big upset this week. But again, Seattle has played really well, especially at home. Offensively, we know that they have a lot of weapons. They're going to put up 20 plus points. And it feels like the Giants are going to scratch and claw and maybe get 16. Like that's what it's been this whole year. It felt like, against Dallas, they moved the ball a lot and were able to gain yardage, but their inability to get in the end zone really needs to be studied in a lab. I said that on Monday, but it still rings true all these days later. like I said, again, I don't really like their chances, unfortunately, going on the road to Seattle this week.
Yeah, and you want to know, make matters worse here, just taking a look at the running back room, right? Because we're like, okay, how do they pass the football without Malik Neighbors? It's going to be really tough to get guys open. They don't have that playmaking ability. Then you look in the backfield, okay, Devin Singletary hasn't practiced this week because he has a groin injury. So now we're talking about maybe it's going to be fifth round rookie Tyrone Tracy starting in the backfield. I'm all here for the Tyrone Tracy breakout game. In fact, I'm going to make a tweet after we're done recording about that because I think it could happen. However, let's face it, if you're relying on your offense to be ran by a fifth round rookie to pick up most of your yardage on a Sunday afternoon against one of the best defenses in the NFL, I mean, that is just a recipe for disaster. So this really could be a disastrous game for the Giants. And again, it just kind of sticks in my mind last year when Daniel Jones had that poor performance against the Seahawks. I remember it was their rookie cornerback, Devon Witherspoon, who went into the media and said, yeah, we studied him on film. We knew that he stared down his first read. So we were kind of bailing on some coverage assignments to jump routes and get pick sixes. Like, that's literally what the guy said. He was a rookie saying that about a fifth-year veteran. And to be honest, not much has changed going into year 6. We haven't seen the leap start to take shape for Daniel Jones. I think that it's going to be a little bit scary as he tries to throw into some tight windows without Malik Neighbors against a Seahawks defense that knows how to read him.
Yeah, that can't happen again. And I'm curious to see how he responds after that. Like, they had those, he threw that pass and he played horrible in that game at home against Seattle. But then the comments from the rookie comes out and it's like, all right, are you going to just show, like, are you going to shut us up now, or are you just going to continue to lean into it? And as we said, to make matters worse, like, Neighbors and Devin Singletary have been two of the better offensive pieces for the Giants this year, and there's a chance that both those guys don't play. If that's the case, I mean, good luck, because it's going to be a lot of Wandale underneath, but I think they would expect that coming. So I don't know how the Giants move the ball against this Seattle team, who's again played really well. I wanted to pull up their DVOA rating. They are 8th in defense, 5th offensively this year. So tough.
Yeah, the only way that the Giants find an opportunity to win this game and make a difference, in my opinion, it's going to be their defense has to make some sort of a big splash play. Like, there's got to be a pick six, a fumble six, turnovers forced. That's the way to do it. And honestly, Greg Joseph, the kicker, needs to be like perfect in this one because I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities to kick the ball. But, this is one of those games where the offense, you just can't envision them realistically moving the ball with ease against this defense. But then at the same time, now you're relying on the defense to make these plays and try and win the game, but they're going up against a tremendous offense. And that's the next thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is,
Yeah.
I love Deontay Banks and I still see the potential in him, but I always say this about cornerbacks and safeties: your CB1 or your safety 1 is only as good as your cornerback or safety 2, right? It's so difficult for a cornerback to succeed with zero help around them. And right now, especially with injuries to Drew Phillips and Adoree Jackson, and Nick McLeod's been in and out of the lineup. And in my opinion, Cordell Fly, while he's been playing well, he's not really a CB2. It just makes your CB1 look that much worse when he's got to travel with the CeeDee Lambs and Justin Jeffersons of the world and Amari Coopers and just basically get torched. Now, Banks has to play better for sure, but he's been playing poorly. And now the secondary that's beat up, has injuries, and a lack of talent is going up against the Seahawks receiving core with JSN, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. That, if there is anything that tells me disaster game incoming, that's exactly it.
Right. It's not just one guy that Seattle has. They are, and Tyler Lockett, even at 32, is still, putting up pretty decent numbers. He has 199 receiving yards. He has 5+ catches in 3 of their 4 games. Like, he's still a really big part of the offense. And JSN, it feels like he's taking another step as well. He has 226 yards so far in the 4 games. Neither Lockett or Jackson Smith and Jigba have gotten in the end zone, but Geno hasn't really thrown for a ton of touchdowns yet. He has 4 in 4 games, but I mean, I think just eye test wise, Geno's looked good. He's leading the league in yards. He's also leading the league in attempts. And I would imagine that against this Giants defense, like you said, who's banged up at the position, I would imagine they're going to attack this team through the air, right?
I would imagine so. I think that that's the way that you have to do it. But you know what? Then again, the Giants' run defense hasn't been too great this season either. So there's many ways that the Seahawks team can attack this Giants defense. And what it really comes back to at the end of the day is the fact that the Giants' offense can't respond. I think what we saw last week, Giants versus Cowboys, it felt like the Cowboys got a little bit of a lead early and knew that there was no chance in the world that the Giants were actually going to be able to respond. They knew that the Giants couldn't score touchdowns, so they kind of just phoned it in for the rest of the game, is how I felt. Like, there's been a lot of criticisms for the Dallas Cowboys offense, or really just their performance on Thursday night. A lot of people have been saying that they didn't look all that great against the Giants, and I don't know. I guess I just interpreted the game differently. To me, it looked like that team, that Dallas team, just kind of knew they were going to win and didn't have to try to win. So they kind of stopped trying. We're like, let's preserve some of our health. It's a short week. Let's not force feed the ball to CeeDee Lamb. He already had his big touchdown. He had his big play. He scored. Let's rest him pretty much for the rest of the game, have him run some cardio, but let's not give him opportunities to get hit. Let's just hand the ball off to Rico Dowell and let him fall forward. And, and Ezekiel Elliott, let him fall forward, and we'll just sit on this ball and win the game. And that's really what the Dallas Cowboys did. They knew the Giants offense wouldn't score points and respond. And that's exactly what the Seahawks are going to be able to do. So they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to throw the ball. And a lot of that's just going to be the fact that this Giants defense is going to be on the field a lot, because this Giants offense has not been able to score points without Malik Neighbors.
I'm with you on that one. Also, I want to close with our score predictions and final thoughts on this game. But if you'll humor me for a moment, can I ask you about something I saw floating around on Giants Twitter this week that I don't understand, that I'm hoping you give me some clarity on?
I think I know where you're going with this, so let's see it.
Dexter Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the stupidest thing that I've ever heard in my life.
So give me the full context for those who don't know.
This is coming from a Vikings fan, or a few Vikings fan, a contingent of Vikings fans who believe that because the Giants have not won a lot of games this year, the Vikings are going to be able to make a trade and acquire Dexter Lawrence. So they're pushing for it. They're saying, make the trade, call the Giants, send them a mid-round pick, and take Dexter Lawrence. Okay, let's be realistic here. The Giants, yes, are a bad team. Dexter Lawrence is one of the best players in the NFL. He is actually on like a Hall of Fame trajectory. He's that damn good, especially now that Aaron Donald isn't in the league anymore. We should be talking perennial first-team All-Pro for Dexter Lawrence, right? He's that good. The Giants aren't going to give him up for anything less than 3 first-round picks, and no team is sending them 3 first-round picks. This isn't even a real rumor. This is like just BS. But here's the kicker. There are Giants fans who legitimately want it to happen. There are Giants fans who are like, we're wasting his prime. He's a defensive lineman. Those guys on the interior aren't that impactful. Trade him, get what you can.
That's crazy.
Giants fans never fail to amaze me with their pure stupidity, is what I tweeted about it yesterday. Somebody commented on Fireside Giants. It was like, Anthony, shut your mouth. You're ridiculous. Like, Giants need to trade Dexter Lawrence. Guys, come on. He's Dexter freaking Lawrence. He's the best defensive lineman in the NFL. I don't care if interior defenders usually aren't that impactful. Look at the numbers. He's had like 80 pressures compared to 16 next best at his position across the last 2 seasons. Guy is one of the greatest nose tackles to ever play the game. There's no way the Giants can trade him.
Yeah, I get, and Jeff fans get this way about Quinnen Williams a lot, because they don't see like the at least the last 2 years haven't really seen the sack numbers. And like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like he's had this the best start ever, this most amazing start. But like, if you actually watch the film and see that he's like double and sometimes triple teamed on plays, like the interior guys can absolutely have an impact and then open things up for your edge rushers too. So I just saw that one and thought that was kind of nuts. I agree with you. There's not a chance in hell that the Giants actually trade him. But then to like the trades that I was seeing out there for like a mid-round pick is not anywhere close to what Dexter Lawrence would actually go for. It was just silly season, and just, I don't know. Wanted to get your take on that before we, round this thing out with our predictions for this game.
Yeah, it's the absolute silliest thing ever. It's purely stupid. And Giants fans who want to trade Dexter Lawrence and think that it's a wise idea to move on from him and take a draft pick, I think it needs to be put into perspective. You're going to get a draft pick for this player. You're not going to draft a player of the quality of Dexter Lawrence. It is so unlikely. It's like the Family Guy meme where it's like, we could take the boat or the mystery box. The mystery box can be anything, even a boat. That's what you're doing here with Dexter Lawrence. You could trade Dexter Lawrence away and take a draft pick. It could be anything. It could be Dexter Lawrence, but then again, it could also be, I don't know, name any of the graveyard of New York Giants draft picks. DeAndre Baker is one of them. I mean, there's so many of them.
Yeah, right. Like that's just the thing. And if you're trading him to, in this case, Minnesota, with how they're playing, like, are you gonna get the 28th pick in the draft, maybe? And what are you hoping to do with that? I don't know. I think it's silly season. But anyway, back to this game. Let's close out with our final thoughts and predictions. It doesn't sound like you're going to be predicting a Giants win this week.
I am not. I hope I'm wrong. Always got to clarify that. As a Giants fan, I might not predict that the Giants win, but believe me, I want them to. Even when everybody's calling for tank season, I'm calling for Tommy DeVito to go put up another win. So I never want to see this team lose. However, I think they are going to lose, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be a real ugly bloodbath, and I think they're going to lose probably somewhere in the range of 30-10.
Okay. I'm not that much of a bloodbath, but I am going to predict a win for the Seahawks. I just think it's going to be really tough offensively in this one for the Giants for all the reasons, especially if Neighbors doesn't play. I'm thinking like 24-13, somewhere in that range. I think the defense does enough for the Giants. They've done that the last few weeks, and they haven't let these games really get into like blowout territory. So I think that streak will continue, but I think the unfortunate streak of this offense not being able to do enough will also continue. So I got the Seahawks 24-13. Before we hop out of here, I do want to go to our guy Johnny Boy, who asked us a question. He's got one for each of us. First one, do you think Neighbors gets Rookie of the Year? I have a Neighbors Rookie of the Year ticket, but I'm starting to sweat that with Jaden Daniels. Where are you at with the Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him to beat out his friend Jaden Daniels, former teammate, but I think it's possible. I think he can do it. Listen, Jaden Daniels has been excellent, but a lot of it's been a really great scheme from Cliff Kingsbury. I think as the season goes on, we could see a little bit more variance in Jaden Daniels' play. Like, he's not going to be perfect like that every single week. He had an excellent month, but I can't see that happening across the full season. So I think there's going to be some slip up games and some mistakes down the road. And meanwhile, Neighbors as a wide receiver, the production can just be very steady from that position. And he's not going to have big mistakes like throwing picks or anything and losing the game for his team. So, I mean, if Neighbors gets back healthy, and honestly, there's another element of this with Daniel Jones not in the lineup eventually later the season, potentially. If Drew Lock steps in and starts hitting those deep balls to Neighbors, I mean, he might start bringing in 60-yard touchdowns and really padding his stats. And then, yeah, he's going to be Rookie of the Year. So while I'm not giving up on the dream yet, Jaden Daniels is making a push. He's the odds-on favorite, but I still think that Malik Neighbors has a really good chance of winning the award.
As for the second part, he asks, am I the only one that believes Adams is using the Jets to get more money somewhere else? I don't think the money really plays a factor in this one. I think he's going to have to redo his contract anyway, if he wants to, because he's got one more year or the rest of this year with guaranteed money and then no guaranteed money after this. So it would be very likely if he doesn't restructure that it would just be a rental for this year. I don't really think the money plays much of a factor in the Adams situation. Do you, Anthony?
No, not necessarily. I think he just wants to go to an opportunity where he'll get the ball a bunch and win. Like, I think that's what this is truly about. It's almost like a legacy thing. Davante Adams has been among the best wide receivers in the NFL every year. Some of those years he's been the best, but he hasn't won a whole lot. And I think that this is just him trying to find a situation that's better than this Raiders situation. Because I gotta be honest, I love Antonio Pierce, one of my favorite players back in that heyday with the Giants. I didn't think that was the best hiring. I felt like that was more of just kind of the ownership feeling the pressure from the fans who really bought into the players coach mentality, but he's not necessarily the best strategist. I mean, he's a rookie head coach. So I just don't think Davante Adams as a veteran superstar receiver is in the right situation to be with a rookie head coach that's developing in his own right, a players coach like that. So I honestly think he just really wants a change of scenery. I don't think it's about money. I think it's about winning.
I'm with you on that one. So that'll do it for us in this episode. Make sure to follow along Anthony's work over on Fireside Giants. You can catch me on Matt O'Leary NY and on Talking Jets. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we'll catch you next time.